Hello everyone, welcome to Cine Recap family. Today we are going to see an adventure film from 2019, titled The Adventures of Jurassic Pet. The movie portrays the story of a young boy who tries to protect his pet dinosaur from an evil scientist. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie opens in the middle of a forest. An old man is returning to his home after fishing. On his way, he found a big egg on the ground. He took the egg in his hand. Suddenly he heard a hissing sound. A big T-Rex came near him. Both of them stared at each other. The old man said, "Hi there." T-Rex's roar is heard throughout the forest, and the scene ends there. 5 years later, in the middle of the forest, some scientists are doing some kind of research on a crocodile. They are trying to create a new dinosaur species here. The chief scientist, who was the antagonist of the film, came there and injected a serum into the crocodile. Suddenly the crocodile started to behave rudely, then they tranquilized the crocodile. It seems they have been researching many crocodiles, but still now they haven't figured out a perfect DNA match to create the dinosaur. The chief scientist is very angry, because if he didn't give significant results in a few days, his fundings will be stopped. On the next scene, some middle school students are seeing the fossils and bones of some dinosaurs at a museum. Their teacher is explaining about the destruction of dinosaurs to them. A young boy named Chris, who is fond of dinosaurs and loves to discover new things, asked the teacher whether any relatives of dinosaurs are living now. The teacher said yes, some birds, frogs, crocodiles are distant relatives of dinosaurs living now. Then Chris questions, what if a large dinosaur is living somewhere now? Everyone laughed at him except Chris's best friends John and Carrie. Teacher said no, all the dinosaurs died, and led the students to see other fossils. While other students were following the teacher, Chris stood there and admired a large dinosaur's bone. Chris's friends came there and took him to join his classmates. The trip is over and everyone is returning to their home. While on his way, Chris asked his friends to go home and he went inside a shop called World of Wonders. In that shop, Chris saw many antique things. The shopkeeper, who looks exactly like the old man we saw in the beginning of the movie, told Chris that the toy shop is next to this building. Chris said he is not looking for toys and said he is looking for something new and unusual. The old man appreciated him and showed him a mummified cat from Egypt. Chris said he knows that there are 18,000 of them and asked for a unique one. He showed many things, but Chris asked for something that nobody had seen before. The old man searched and gave him an old box which was locked. Chris was excited to see what's inside and asked the price of the box. The old man said he didn't want money and asked him to promise him to keep the box very much safe. Chris promised and went home with the box. He opened the box and found a big egg. This is the egg which the old man found 5 years ago. He watched the process to hatch an egg on YouTube. He created the exact conditions to make the egg hatch and went to eat lunch with his parents. After eating the lunch, he came to his room and waited for the egg to hatch. Few minutes later, the egg started to break and a cute little dinosaur came out. The little dinosaur ran all over the room and broke many things there and hid under the bed. Chris placed some candies before the bed and asked the dinosaur to come outside. The little dinosaur ate the candies and came near him. Chris said he is not its enemy and rubbed its head gently. It seems the little dinosaur was hungry, so it began to eat notebooks. Chris realized it and went to the kitchen to take some food. While entering the room again, the dinosaur had grown a little bigger. Chris noticed it and gives him some food. He named the dinosaur as Albert. Both played with the ball. Chris's mom came to his room and asked him to sleep. Chris hid Albert from his mother and said he is going to sleep. After his mother was gone, both of them began to sleep. The next day Chris got ready for school and came out of his house with Albert. John and Carrie came there and saw Albert. Chris told them what happened and said Albert is growing quickly. Carrie touched Albert and became friends with him. Chris skips school and goes to meet the old man who gave the egg with Albert in his backpack. He got inside the shop and asked for the old man. An old lady in the shop said she was the one who was running the shop for the last 5 years. Chris saw the photo of the old man there and said he wants to meet him. The old lady said it's her husband and he died 5 years ago. Chris doesn't understand what is happening and takes Albert to the museum to learn about it. The chief scientist also came to the museum. It seems he is collecting fossil samples to extract dinosaur DNA. While Chris is walking in the museum, Albert jumps out of his bag and ran away. Some children saw it, but they thought it was a robotic dinosaur. The chief scientist saw Albert and Chris through a CCTV camera and ran to catch Albert to do research on it. Albert ran here and there and went outside the museum. Chris chased Albert and the chief scientist chased Chris. After a big chase, Chris caught Albert and put "It in the bag." The chief scientist reached Chris and asked him what was in the bag, but Chris ran from there without saying anything. Albert hummed out of hunger. Chris went to the supermarket to buy food for it. In the supermarket, a dog saw Albert and started to chase it. Albert became afraid and ran away and messed up the whole place. At last Albert went out and boarded in the backside of a car. The car owner came there and started to drive his car. Chris tried to follow him, but the car went away. After reaching the home, the man saw Albert in his car. He thought it was a monster and tried to shoot Albert. Albert ran away and the man called the police. Police came there and caged Albert. They thought it was a large lizard and called the chief scientist since he is the expert in reptiles. They took Albert to the police station. Chris saw it and went to the police station. He saw Albert in a cage. It seems he has grown bigger now. An old man who was already sitting in the police station asked Chris what he was doing there. He looks exactly like the old man who gave him the egg. Chris told him about the Albert. The old man said Albert needed a big space to grow and asked him to take it to the forest. Chris agrees to that, but he doesn't know what to do. The chief scientists and his associates came there and took Albert in their van. While going, Albert looked at Chris sadly. Chris told Albert that he will save him. After they left, Chris came outside to follow them and rescue Albert. The old man said he knows exactly where they are taking Albert and said he will help to save him. The chief asked his other associates and guards to be ready in the lab. He planned to kill Albert and extract his DNA to recreate a new dinosaur. Chris doesn't know how to follow them. The old man went inside a nearby house and brought a hill climbing car. Chris and the old man got in that car and started driving to the lab. While they were going, Chris's dad saw him, but he thought it was a hallucination. The chief scientist reached his lab. After giving a self-proud speech to his associates, he took the dinosaur inside the lab. Chris and the old man used nitro boosters to go faster towards the lab. It seems the car doesn't have brakes. They tried to stop the car with an anchor, but they threw the anchor without attaching its rope in the car. Finally, the old man hit the car on a tree and stopped it. They went near the lab. Many guards guarded the lab. The old man distracted them by telling them he will do magic. Chris entered the lab from the other side and found Albert caged. Albert became a fully grown dinosaur. While he is about to release Albert, two guards came there. The old man came there and knocked them down. Chris took the keys from the guards and released Albert. The chief and others surrounded them and asked the guards to lock them up. Guards were scared to see Albert because he was big in size. The chief told them not to be afraid of the dinosaur. Albert roared loudly and started to run from there with Chris and the old man. The chief scientist and the guards chased them with guns. Albert, Chris, and the old man reached the middle of the forest. Albert and Chris hid inside a cave. The chief shouted and asked Chris to give Albert up, saying he could give him more money. But Chris, Albert, and the old man ran from there. The chief and the guards missed them and went in the wrong direction. The old man said they need to split up. He told Chris that they needed to return home by leaving Albert in the forest. But Chris refused it, saying it's his responsibility to take care of Albert. The old man convinced Chris, saying the forest is the only safe place for Albert to live happily. Chris realized it and said goodbye. Albert left the place sadly. Chris told Albert that he loves him and asked Albert to take care. Albert went inside the forest and the old man and Chris reached the main road. The chief surrounded them and asked where Albert was. Chris said Albert is somewhere safe. Suddenly a police car came there. The chief scientist and others ran away. The old man and Chris reached the city and sat outside the shop where Chris found the egg. Chris thanked him. John and Carrie came there and asked where Albert was. Chris said Albert is gone and turned back to the old man to introduce his friends, but the old man was not there. Chris was confused and looked inside the shop. The old man raised his hand and slowly faded away. Chris now realized that the old man is a ghost and he guided him to save Albert. On the next scene, Albert's roar is heard throughout the forest and the movie ends here. Thank you for watching, guys. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel.